teams or to pass on to other people. Okay, so that's something we will pass on to you, no worries, and that will come as an email following up to you. So just Helen and Caitlin and some people in the waiting room. I'm not sure if you've seen those. So the purpose of this is to understand why wellbeing needs to remain high on the workplace agenda. It is something that we've needed to focus on all through lockdown, but as we start to establish new ways of working, then we need to also focus on wellbeing as something that is really, really important to maintain. And I'll run through why that's important. We'll talk about how you might spot concerns about well-being in your people and in yourself, and there's a number of practical tips about optimizing well-being in your team and in the organization you work for. So starting off, what do we mean by good mental health or well-being? You tend to hear about mental health issues, but you can have good mental health, and all of us, actually, it's something that we all have anyway. It's like physical health, and it can fluctuate. And of course, if we have good mental health, we're going to make the most of our potential. We are going to have coped with the ups and downs of life and recent challenges and be more resilient generally, and ultimately we're going to feel more fulfilled and we'll be better and more productive in the workplace. So that is really key. So we want to manage it, people that work with us that make the most of their mental health and manage them. But some people, for whatever reason, have more challenges with mental health than others. I mean, I use an example. My sister has mental health challenges sometimes, and I'll talk about some of these examples. And one of the things that she was taught when she went through various counseling sessions was that it's a bit like a black hole. People who get things like anxiety or depression, it can be something that is a bit like a black hole that you can end up unwittingly falling into. And the problem is when you fall into the black hole, it's really hard to get out again. So what you really want to do is, whether it's you supporting the people you work with or managing your own mental health, is get better at spotting where that black hole is and walking around the edge. So it's not to say that you're always going to feel totally happy on top of the world, but actually the main thing is trying to avoid getting tipped into a black hole, because actually it's much, much harder to recharge and escape from that. So the earlier we can recognize if things aren't right, the earlier we can get or provide support for others. These are pre-COVID stats, and they come from a longitudinal study. I think it was about 4,000 people, so they're pretty comprehensive. The source is the Mental Health Foundation. I've got the link to this site later on in the notes if you want to look it up. It's got some really useful content. But I felt that this was really quite sobering. If you look at this, actually, mixed anxiety and depression is a very common mental disorder in Britain. So a number of people, they reckon 1 adult in 6 has or has had a common mental disorder. So it's very likely that someone in your team, someone you work with, someone in your family has experienced anxiety or depression. And of course, having been through the experience of COVID and the experience, I don't know about you, but certainly I've got friends who I definitely wouldn't have thought had particular levels of anxiety, who have definitely ramped it up, who've got much more severe anxiety, particularly maybe if they've been shielding this whole concept of changing. They feel that they've become established or almost cocooned in a way of being, and this sense of having to change, it isn't that easy for them just to do it, and it is actually genuine that people are feeling stress and anxiety. You can read further down in terms of those statistics, and you can see actually of those reporting stress, some really quite scary statistics. I've had a guy on my podcast called Andy Sulkeld, who's written a book about life as a 4-letter word, and you check that out, and he's someone who was suicidal, has actually come back from the brink and has written a book on it. And it's quite an interesting insight into someone in a professional services role who's experienced that. So I think the reality is it's not something we should brush under the carpet anymore. It is reality. Having a stiff upper lip is actually going to be counterproductive. And looking at that bottom point, given the situation at the moment in the marketplace with redundancies going on, if people felt, 20% of people felt nervous about their employment at the time, 34% were concerned about losing their job. This is pre-COVID. So you're going to expect those statistics to be increased. So I don't want to depress anybody, but I think the reality is that we need to be quite aware and alert about well-being for the foreseeable future, for ourselves and for others. And there is that whole thing is make sure we look after ourselves first. if at all possible, because it's that, you know, how are you going to look after your family or your team if you don't feel resilient yourself? So let's look at what we can do about this, and we'll go into that further in the future in a moment. But first of all, I've got a first poll. So I said I'd make this interactive. We are going to put up a poll here, which is going to ask you about your own mental health. So would you consider during the lockdown period that it improved, was much the same, you have healthy mental health during lockdown, or was it much the same, you don't generally have less positive mental health during lockdown, so it remained the same, less healthy? Did you find it fluctuated, but you managed to pick yourself up? Or do you actually feel that it declined during lockdown? So we'll give you a few moments to vote. So we're up to 55% of votes there. It's all anonymous, the votes, and what we will do is screenshot these so that the information is available afterwards, because it's often very interesting. So keep going, last few moments for people who want to vote. Select your vote. We've got 140 votes so far. It's 80%, 85%, still going up. Can we get to 90+%? All right, we'll stop the voting in a moment. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 86% have voted. Where's the other 14%? Right, okay, so this is consistent with what we found before. You can now see the poll results, and you can see that actually, so 25% felt they were much the same as usual, healthy, which is nice, but the common one here fluctuated throughout, but managed to pick themselves up 45%, slightly lower than the one we did last time actually there. So some people have declined. The key of doing this poll is you're thinking about yourselves here, but this is going to be representative of the people in your team as well, isn't it? So if you know that actually we've got about, of respondents, almost 20% of people will have found their mental health declined or wasn't good during lockdown. You also can see that 45%, so the majority of people have felt that their mental health has been fluctuating or has declined. Useful for us to know, because then again we can be sensitive to supporting people, because they can't be productive if we don't manage this. I'll just share with you the results when we did this recently on a LinkedIn poll. It was almost exactly the same number of people as we had there, and very similar results. Interestingly, slightly higher felt fluctuating and lower than usual. And I think we ran this about a month ago. And I think that's perhaps when many of us were feeling that lockdown, we were still in lockdown, we were 12 weeks in, and people were feeling lower energy, this sort of lockdown lethargy. Maybe now things have opened up, we're starting to feel a little bit more invigorated, hopefully. So while we might be developing a vaccine for the virus, we know it's still around here, and there isn't going to be one for the associated mental illnesses, and they are going to continue. And again, when we've surveyed people, professionals, many people feel that they will increase post-lockdown. These statistics that we've just come up with here would also support that. And one of the other concerns that we've had is that people felt that attrition or absenteeism might also increase. I'm just going to check that. I think I'm just going to get rid of this. We don't need the poll results there. Are the poll results down, Helen? I'm just checking they were just sharing then for me. Check people can see. Can you just send me, can you see my slides, guys, rather than poll results? Let me know if you
Sorry, I'm just taking it down. Sorry,
you take it down. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Helen. All right, that's because we've got another poll. All right, so again, putting ourselves now in the shoes of our people. And again, you can select all that apply, and we've run this before. It's interesting as these have evolved going through. We have got a second poll for us to think about what specifically might people be worrying about, what might be affecting their well-being. So we'll post this up again now. If Helen, do you want to put the second one up for me, please? We've got a number of options, and if you think there's something else that we've not thought of, by all means put it in the chat. So what do you think the predominant concerns are? You can choose more than one. Choose maybe 2 or 3, whichever you think are the predominant ones that people are going to be worried about. And also, if there's something that you think is coming to light that people are worrying about now, do feel free to pop that in the chat, because it's interesting how we've added things in as we've gone through this. Because actually, one of the early ones I didn't have in was the ability for people to continue working remotely. They were very concerned about having to come back into work and returning into work. So what we're seeing is lots of them. I'll share the results in a moment, with 50% have voted, so keep going, guys. But you can see actually all of these are almost pretty level. So that would suggest that we feel that many are fluctuating. Thank you. Okay, yes, the health of loved ones is a suggestion. That's a really good point. I haven't got that on there, has it? So you're worried about other people, and as we open up, they're going to be concerning. And of course, if they're having to come into the workplace worried about bringing the virus back to people who they might have been shielding. So we're up to 85%. Let's share the results now. So where we've got to, let's see. So you have a look for yourselves what people are worrying about. So this is consistent with results we've seen previously, I would say. But so safety of the workplace, don't really want to commute, ability to continue working remotely. So all of those are reinforcing a similar point that people want to carry on working remotely, I believe. Childcare hasn't gone away as an issue. So basically all of these things there, and I think job security has crept up a little bit, and that doesn't surprise me given the circumstances. Health of loved ones, second wave, I agree as well. That is something that people are going to worry about as well, isn't it? Particularly if they're being forced to come back out. So those are the sort of things that we know people are being concerned about, and you may be sharing those concerns as well. And they're all legitimate. The reality is we can't remove these issues entirely. It's not in our control. This is completely out of our control. So we can't remove the concern, but what we can do is empathize. And again, you as an individual, if you're a line manager, need to look after your own mental health. So we'll talk later about the things we can do to make sure that we're feeling resilient and we're able to do that. Sorry, I must get the polling jumping up again. So we'd really encourage you to look after yourself first, because it's actually really exhausting managing other people's energy. So if you're finding other people in your team are struggling, it is quite exhausting. But you can empathize. And when I say empathize, it isn't about taking on their concerns for yourself so that you have more on your shoulders, but you can listen to people and empathize with their concerns. And Stephen Covey has a great quote that I really like, is that if you really listen to somebody, you don't have to solve it. It's not about solving the problems. We can't solve a lot of these problems, but show that you understand. It's like giving them emotional oxygen. So even when you can't change these, it's actually making sure that you can help people by just listening and empathizing without taking it on yourself. So let's start thinking about what we can do. So in terms of managing or increasing well-being, and this is all about you preventing yourself from dropping into the black hole, or encouraging people in your team to do that, these are 11 evidence-based well-being tips. And again, I think I got them from the site earlier, the Mental Health Foundation. First of all, exercise, the endorphin side of things, getting people to actually move away from their desks. And we've just kicked off a wellbeing initiative in our business where we're going to have a competitive whatever it is in terms of wellbeing. So it doesn't have to be just physical exercise. There's other ways in which you can look after yourself. But exercise, making sure people are moving and encouraging them to move throughout the day, because we're not necessarily, if we're home-based, getting that natural walking up to the canteen or popping out to get a bite of lunch. We're not getting those natural movements. So encourage people to be active. Food, nutrition and water, real basics, but actually makes a massive difference to mental health. So if we're eating rubbish, it isn't going to help us. So encouraging healthy eating, looking after your nutrition is key. And in principle, people can cook and eat well at home. That is one of the benefits of being at home in theory. Stimulants can help to a certain point, but too much of them may be counterproductive. So things like alcohol and caffeine, they will probably therefore negatively affect sleep. We've heard all sorts of weird things about lockdown dreams and people not sleeping as well because of stress during lockdown. So all of those things above, exercise, nutrition, and not too many stimulants, will help sleep. Sleep is a massive recharge and a massive, we all know when we've had poor sleep, how you can feel more depressed. When I served with my team, they talked about taking real breaks. And I think that was harder during lockdown. It's quite nice now you can even go into a coffee shop or even go out to a restaurant, even though it feels different. But having a change of activity and a change of scene, whether it's going out to just to be with nature or whatever it might be, but moving away from that office, whatever your office might look like. So encouraging people to take real breaks. And having social contact. So even when we were having social distance, you could go for a socially distanced dog walk. So if people you've got in your team who are anxious, so are the ways in which they can have social contact. Also, I think phone conversations as opposed to just Zoom can be quite helpful, because there's something about watching video that it's slightly weird in terms of the timings out, which can be more tiring. Other things are making sure that we're doing things that we're good at or we enjoy. It's always good, it's hard if you're doing things that you're bad at, and that's the same if you're managing people in your team. What you might have found with people working virtually is they haven't been drawing on their virtual team members to the same extent as they might have done in the office, where you might just ask someone to help you with things. That might mean that they're ending up spending more time on tasks that they're not great at and are not asking for help. That isn't good for your self-esteem if you're doing things that you're not good at and you don't enjoy. So maybe make sure that people are playing to their strengths and that virtual teamwork is happening. Be kind to ourselves, ask for help, encourage people to ask for help, ask people to talk about how they feel. And I added on reduce social media because I think that can be quite draining when people are quite negative, and the things in the media. So actually, and it's quite addictive too. So those are some practical tips. We have an infographic on that we'll provide you with. We'll send it out to you that you might find helpful to share with your team. Maybe you can do a little well-being challenge and give people points for different things that might support their well-being. Now, here's a question for you in the chat. These are some of the things that I believe might be warning signs for someone's well-being dropping off. Which one would you identify with, or have you seen in someone in your team, or do you recognize in yourself? So people who start withdrawing, so they're not contacting each other. People who are procrastinating, putting off doing something. Sometimes that means they're scared of doing things, or sometimes they just don't have the motivation. They might be a bit chaotic. That's the opposite to it. They're not doing anything or being chaotic. People talking about being drained or tired. You might hear in their voice that they're very monotone, working extremely long hours or emails in the middle of the night. Maybe they can't sleep. You can have both things: lack of productivity, taking too much on, poor timekeeping, so not seeming to be in control, lack of or over enthusiasm. So note how you get all of these different things. Yes, so irritable. Yeah, I get that. Get snappy. So Hazel says that was something that you get there. Yes, I don't think we've got that one recognised there particularly, have we? Yeah, irritability. That's one that's perhaps not on there. Just a bit grumpy. Again, you might see people who don't interact on social forums or never off the social forums, and those sort of displacement activities where people are talking about other aches and pains. Now, there may be genuine aches and pains from maybe having a bad desk set up, so people might have neck ache or shoulder ache because they're perhaps they're not set up properly to homework. But equally, sometimes we might complain about something else, and that isn't the real, that's just masking the symptom that overall that person is perhaps a bit depressed. The classic one being backache. Anecdotally, people always used to say people go off with sort of physical problems, back pain, when actually it was depression, when it was less socially acceptable. Simone, you've got it on the money there. So Simone says a general change in behaviour, not themselves. Almost being defensive there in terms of things. So to my point, the key here is any change from the norm is an example of something. So people can become wildly over enthusiastic, or someone who's normally enthusiastic might become quite pessimistic. The key is, if you know your people, it's actually knowing that it's a change from the norm. So recognizing that and spotting it and maybe just asking about it. So you've got examples here, people aren't taking leave, and it's really hard with restrictions on travel, but actually, my team have started we've been working 4-day weeks, taking extra time, and they've found that having that bit of downtime is actually helpful to productivity. So perhaps almost assuming people, getting people to do that. Do enforce that maybe. Right. So this is my question for you, and I think some of you probably have answered this already. I have got irritability on here, but if you're going to do yourself, I picked some of the key ones. Which would be the most visible sign of stress for you out of those ones that we've put up there? So we'll pop another poll up for you. We can do that. Are here. So which one would you say is the most visible sign of stress for you? I'm trying to think what I would say mine is. I think, yeah, I definitely can do probably any of them. But I think I'm easily distracted, especially if I'm tired. I'm not very good at focusing. And the thing with irritable or emotional, you might not always get that. It's sometimes you see that that's the family pick up on that rather than yourself. And this is an interesting one. Things like making silly mistakes. As a manager, you might think that person's not paying attention to detail, but actually it could be a sign of them being stressed or not feeling great. Overwhelmed, Diane. I completely agree. That's it. Overexcited. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, good examples there coming up in the chat as well. Okay, so we've got up to 82% voting, and we can end the polling and we'll share with you what people are saying. So the main ones are being irritable or emotional would be quite common. But again, I wonder whether your family sees that and you don't always see that at work. Lack of productivity or focus. So keeping an eye on what helps someone to be focused. And remember, so they're not doing it to be lazy. It actually might mean that they're struggling. So we need to understand what that is. Yes, good, absolutely. Thanks for sharing your examples, guys, in there. But all of those could be an example, and this is what you might demonstrate yourself in there. Some great examples there. So we get getting an idea of the sort of things that we show ourselves, which of course we would see them in other people as well. We know that what we can do is try to empathize with people, try to get people to talk about them. If they are withdrawing, trying to have that conversation. And this is the sort of tips that I think that we can do as line managers to try and encourage people to at least open up and support them and avoid that black hole. So if you can, if you can be as available as possible, and when I say be available, that doesn't mean that you have to be available 24/7 to such an extent that it negatively affects your own well-being. But the key is trying to be sufficiently available that they can contact you if they want to. So we use Skype an awful lot, and if people want to get hold of me on things, they'll just message me, and I'll respond back as soon as possible, generally when I'm available. So, and that would tend to be pretty quickly. Just people, get you with your people are ticking them. Feel free to tick this. You're using the drawing tools. Feel free to tick the ones that you think that are relevant to you. There, being open. This is quite important. Sharing any personal struggles or challenges. So I certainly, this is going to be interesting what sort of drawing we have on here. I certainly had a couple of 2 or 3 wobbly days in the middle of lockdown. I actually did a podcast on one of them because I thought it's actually useful to share that often we've been feeling else. And I talked to the team one day, I said, I've just been feeling really, really flat. Is anyone else feeling that way? And we had a really great chat about what we were doing and how we could support each other and those sort of things. Oh, you're so clever, guys. You're doing things that I didn't even know you could do on chat. We'll have to get a picture of this, Helen, one of these great pictures coming up for people. So your starring or hearts, the ones that you think are the most important, I'm thinking. Ask how people feel and really listen to the answer. Trust. We've done a whole session on trust, and people are saying if you trust people to deliver against clear, agreed goals. The consensus on the podcast I did on this and on the webinar I did on this is that if you trust people, 80% felt that actually that linked to increased productivity. So it is a really good one to do. And if you're in a low cost trust culture, it's probably counterproductive. Being scales, I think that's really helpful just to agree with the individual, because you don't necessarily know how easy they're finding something. Again, going back to that point of working to our strengths. Recognition. Find the opportunity to recognize and praise people if you can, because actually they say that in virtual environments less of that happens. So making the opportunity to try and recognize people on a team call. Why not ask each other to recognize each other? If someone's not meeting a deadline, then ask them why, or understand just with an open mind. It's not that, what's going on? Do they need help? What's the possible cause as to why they haven't been able to do something? Do avoid presenteeism. I think it's counter to a high trust culture. I have consciously said to my guys, just you don't have to be at your desk. We need to be available in terms of if we need you on something, but get out in the middle of the day, go and do exercise in the middle of the day. The benefit of being at home, if you've worked really hard and you've done what you need to do, knock off early. I'd much rather people are delivering the outputs that we require than sitting at their desk and not being productive and being exhausted. I noticed you missed a deadline. Are you okay? That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I don't know who did that, but that's great. Encourage people to set and own their own outputs and timescales. It's really important to be empowering in these circumstances, isn't it? We can't dictate it. So that's really key. And as I said earlier, give people permission to stop and take a break when needed. Thank you for all of the lovely interactivity and the hearts. I really like that. So I'm hoping that someone's got a screenshot of it for me, because I thought that was great. I don't know if it'll come out on the video. It's fab. I've got 2 people in the waiting room, guys. Okay, so next slide. We're almost there in terms of this. Now, this is maybe chunking up a bit. Now, what I don't know is how to clear this screen.
Lucinda, what
yes.
you need to do is if you go to view options at the top of the screen, you should be able to clear it as you're the host.
Hold on a minute. See, I haven't got that on. Clear options. Are you able to do it as a co-host, do you think, Helen? Or is it just me?
I am not allowed, unfortunately.
Oh. Right. Slightly embarrassing. All right. Well, I'm just going to... I'll let you just read through these while I just have a little look around my very pretty pictures here. Hide floating meeting controls. No, clear. No. If anyone knows how to, can you raise your hand? You'll be there all day, guys. If you're able to,
you should have something at the top of your screen, Lucinda. That's a black box. It says View Options, and then drop down. As the host.
Maybe if you click Annotate, Lucinda, the options might appear. You might be able to clear that way. If not, I think people can clear their own, but
hang on a minute. Yeah, I've got it. It was Annotate. That's what I needed. I couldn't see that other one. Clear all drawings. Magic. Apologies for that. I've learned something new. So it's every day's learning journey. Right. So how can we promote well-being as leaders? You are able to put on this again now if you want to, because I now know how to clear it. So these were some ideas if you're in a leadership role, and which we all are, aren't we? So getting people to share getting other people, if you've got senior leaders who are happy to be open about mental health, and this is more sort of about long-term well-being, having a culture of well-being, asking people to be open about it. Can you provide people with certainty? One of the things I think that people makes them very anxious is if they think they're going to be things are going to change really quickly. And although if people are on furlough, even with the flexible furlough, legally you can bring people back in 24 hours notice. Actually, emotionally, that's not the right thing for people. So thinking about that, and if there's worries about job certainty, telling people what you can do, even if it is we won't be making any decisions until the 30th of September, is better than leaving it open. Have listening mechanisms, people to chat, pulse surveys, feedback tools, find ways in which you can listen to how people feel. If you've got rolling meeting agendas, maybe have a rolling meeting agenda item about how things are going. We've started doing a social, we have each month now, we have a team brief, and then we have a social interaction brief. Do try and encourage good wellbeing behaviours, and so we've got a little competition going which has been initiated by one of the team about good wellbeing behaviours. And I say it doesn't have to be exercise, it could be doing something like cooking or whatever something is that's good for your mental health. Create this culture where it's all about outputs and just making sure that that's seen as more important than the hours. Now it does require us as line managers to perhaps be a bit clearer about expectations, perhaps check in more frequently with people, but that will help people then to have clarity on what the most important things are. Let's face it, it's changing rapidly in terms of priorities, so regular conversations is key. Wellbeing incentives we talked about. Also, maybe creating some sort of safe space. So whether it's escalation for people if they feel that they want to talk to someone about their mental health. Maybe you've got mental health first aiders in your organisation that you can utilise. I had an example where people were doing a sort of telephone tree where everybody had a buddy that they'd phone once a week during lockdown and just have a chat with. So all of those things, and educate people around you, your people that and your colleagues. Actually, this is very normal, and these are the things we need to do. We need to be very people focused, output focused, in order to manage people's mental health. So my next question actually is a slide which says, what will you do? But now I know you're all so clever with the ability to do these different things. I'm going to clear the screen, and why don't you tick or start or put a heart next to the one that you think that you'd like to do more of in your organization to maybe promote a well-being culture. Which one would you choose to do more of? Outputs, a lot about outputs. Yeah, that's an interesting one. In the chat, how easy do you find that to get to? Do you think you've already got an output focused culture, or is that something that has had to change in your organization? That's definitely a one that people are keen about, isn't it? And then also modeling good well-being behaviors, so encouraging those behaviors and asking others to be well-being. So lots of them you're saying there, but I'm seeing a real emphasis there. Educating other managers as well is key. Helen, I don't know if you can take a quick screenshot of that one before I move on to the next slide. I have to clear them again in time for the next slide. Okay,
yes,
so
I am screenshotting as we go.
Oh, you're a star, thank you. Right, okay. So let's keep going. We're pretty much there in terms of wrapping up. So hopefully those are some key points. But I'm going to also share some other resources that you might find of help. And let me get rid of my stars and hearts here. As I said earlier, if you didn't hear this before, and I'll open the chat up again in a moment so I can see what you're saying. If you want more resources, we've got quite a lot on this because we've been talking about this topic for a while. There's blogs here, the infographics that are on this list, we will send out to you along with the slides. And when this has been videoed, we'll send the link to the video. So you may get it later today, or you might get it tomorrow because it takes a while for the video to link. And there's also podcasts. Those are examples of the podcasts that this is on this topic, which you get from the HR Uprising. All of those are relevant, and you could share those with your people. So I'm hoping that that's been as you expected, and something that you found of value in terms of a set of conversation, maybe some thought provoking. I've now just got a couple of extra polls, which I hoped you wouldn't mind taking part in. And the reason I was asking them is that we run webinars 2 a month anyway, and we're going to continue. But when we have quality data, and we've got 180 odd people on this call, it's really helpful because then we can reflect that in terms of the content that we build. So there's going to be I'll just run through the questions and we'll put the polls up so you can run down the polls, and I'll just explain which one each one's about here. So we're going to look at how we've been managing people, the challenges with managing people with lockdown. So the first one, you can start answering if you want, you can see the poll as well. The first one's going to be asking you about what do you think your biggest challenge or challenges have been managing people during lockdown. Right, so I can see you starring on the screen. Would you mind doing it in the poll for me now, because then we can actually get statistics from you. By all means, star on the screen if you're doing that as well, but the poll should be visible to you. Can you see it? I don't think anyone's gone into the poll yet. I don't know whether it's, they're viewing them. So what's your biggest challenge so far? Which would you say? Has it been difficult remaining connected with people? Has it been difficult keeping people focused? Maintaining their morale or your own? Managing productivity? Have you found you've had to address performance issues? Has it been the most difficult thing being managing your own situation, your own circumstances, or other? And I'll check the comments in a moment and see what you're saying in chat as well. There's then a second question, but I'll run through all the questions first. It's probably easier if I do that for you. The next question was, would you say that during lockdown, you spent more, same, or less time on the following activities? Spend more time talking one-to-one with people or less time? Setting and reviewing short-term goals, so that's about the outputs, or managing performance issues. So interested as to whether you felt, and this is obviously compared to life before lockdown, did you feel you were doing more, the same, or less of any of those? So there's further questions. If you poll down, this is a series of questions, if you guys have found that, brilliant. And then the final question is, if you've got HR tech, and I'm not talking about Zoom and Teams and things like that, because I think everyone's had to do that to a certain extent. If you had some sort of HR tech, say a performance management system, where you're actually setting objectives or things, or doing one-to-ones through it, did you find that when you were using it, that it was more useful? Did you increase the frequency of usage and found it helpful for structure and visibility? Did you use it just the same as normal, which might be loads or not at all? Or did you find that you used it less than normal in a virtual environment? So in terms of that, and if you don't have anything like that, then just choose the fourth option. So there's a series of questions. We can see that 62% of you voted. So if you just keep on with that, and what we'll do is we will capture all this information. We'll screenshot it as well, and then we can share it with you later. And I'm going to use this because we're doing the topic of managing underperformance in August, because that's been something that a lot of people have been requesting. So basically managing performance will be something that we're focusing on. So I'm just using this data to understand whether there have been differences in managing performance for people during this period of time. Okay, so I'll just check the chat so that I can. Great stuff. All right. Some people having struggles to submit. I think, is it letting you in now? All right, okay. That's it. Right, I'm going to come back to some of those comments. That's great. Thank you very much. I can see that some people will probably be having to head off, so please continue to finish off the poll if you can. We'll publish the results in a moment. Just letting you know the future webinars. If you enjoyed this webinar, then come and join us again. We will be doing one about creating a virtual high performance culture, which is more aimed at people professionals, and then the 19th of August is aimed at line managers or anybody, which is how you might deal with performance issues virtually. We've got a whole range of webinar schedules, as I said, are running at least 2 a month, and we've been running some of them as many as 4 a week over lockdown, so you can see any of the previous webinars on that link there. And I'll just going to go to a couple more, and I can see people dropping off. I'm just going to flag this for you. This is hot off the press. So during August, we'll be running a early bird offer for our new virtual training course. It was face-to-face, but it's now virtual. So if you or anyone in your organisation wants to know more about how to manage change, human change and organizational change, virtual or otherwise, then that training course is opening for bookings. It would be booking for September, and we have an early bird pricing on it. So that information will be provided to you as well. Thank you. There is sharing the poll results. So the biggest challenge that people found during lockdown was managing morale or energy, 60%. Yeah, do you know what? I think I would probably say the same myself. I really would. But lots of people have real different. Each of the others are pretty even. So everyone's had that. Any others? Any other issue? Collaborative working, says Graham, was actually getting people to collaborate, team working. Yes, actually, I do know what you mean. You found that hard for people to do it. Someone's saying they had a presenteeism culture before lockdown, so it's been good to get managers to recognise it and that we need to change it. Have you had success with that, Simone? How has that happened? Or is it Simone? Sorry, I know a Simone and a Simone. So has that been easier to do or not? Interested as what it might have been. Continue to hours focused. I'm seeing people here. So Amanda's saying they offer training for mental first aiders, mental health things. Again, if you've got links, feel free to put your link in there, Amanda. We've also got a podcast on mental health first aid training. Yeah, Jessica's saying being open about mental health is great in general. If someone's disclosing their own issues, it's probably not the time to share your own. Yes, I do get your point. So it's not about who's got the biggest mental health issue. Absolutely. We don't want competitive empathy. So we've got some other, I'll just flick down here, to 5K. In Claire's experience, they didn't find that HR were able to do things. Well, it's interesting, actually. I do think that HR have had a very challenging time because they have just been forced into new legislation and lots of tactical activities. So whether or not they just didn't have the bandwidth to handle things, certainly been quite tricky. Yes, the slides will be shared and there will be a recording. So it doesn't matter how many times I say that. It's always, people don't come on at different times, they don't always get it. I'll just put the final slide up, which is my contact details. Do feel free to link in with me. Maybe join the HR Uprising LinkedIn group. We've really got a nice group there. And actually, if anybody wants to jump, we're doing a virtual coffee at 2 o'clock with our LinkedIn group. So if you join very quickly, you can get into that and come and join us for a virtual coffee. So that's everything from me. I really appreciate your interactivity, and thank you for teaching me about how to use annotations. I'll have to bring that more further into my my sessions in the future. If you've got any further questions or anything else that you'd like to add, do feel free to put it in the chat. I'm very happy to take questions if you've got them. Otherwise, please enjoy the rest of your day and the sunshine. Do you know what? Change of scene. Give yourself permission to get outside into the sunshine and go and do something fresh. Sun's got to be good for your well-being. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Lucinda.
Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Lucinda. Take good care.
Hope to have you join again. I don't know all the voices, so it's really lovely to hear from you, though. Thank you, people.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. This is Edgar from Uganda.
Oh, thank you, Edgar. Thank you for joining all the way from Uganda. How did you find us?
Yeah, via internet from my mail.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
You're on our mailing list. Well, you're most welcome, Edgar. Have you come across the podcast, the HR Uprising Podcast?
Not yet.
Well, then you have to do that. You might be my first listener in Uganda.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'll know it's Edgar from Uganda. Thanks, guys. It's really lovely to see some familiar names as well. And please, I hope you'll join us again on a future course, on a future webinar.
Mm-hmm.
Helen, have we got all the information that we want to manage to get all the screenshots you want? Because I know sometimes it's hard to get the poll results, isn't it?
Yes, I do. I will just double check though. It should be fine.
Yeah.
So I've been doing it as we went.
Have you got all of the polls, the last one? Because I was going to close the meeting for everybody.
Yes, I got the last 4.
Super. I didn't go through all the results. That's interesting, isn't it? They have put more. I would have thought people would spend more or less time talking one-to-ones. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, that's great. That's really useful data because we can feed that into the next one. Okie dokes. Right, so I'll close the meeting then, shall I? Yes. Thanks for joining us. If anyone can still hear me, I'm just going to close the meeting down now.